Welcome to Produce Talks.
This whole business is based on relationship and friendships.
Food is darn simple.
What can we do? What are other countries doing?
How important it is for industry to be talking about this.
We're going back to the farm. We're going back to the whole food.
Hello and welcome to Produce Talks, the CPMA podcast. My name is Ian Brody, and this episode I'll be joined by my CPMA colleague and food safety specialist, Jeff Hall, for a conversation on food recalls. Later on, I'll also speak with Tom Bach, National Director of Produce with Sysco Canada. We're going to go over all things food safety and recalls, looking at some recent recalls in the industry, the types of bacteria that we often see associated with recalls, the impacts on consumer confidence, and the processes and responsibilities across the supply chain when a recall happens. And to start off, we're going to welcome Jeff Hall, our food safety specialist at CPMA, into the conversation. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello, Ian. This
episode, we're going to talk about food recalls, but I think it would be good for our audience and for our listeners if we take a step back and quickly start off by reviewing and talking about the different types of bacteria that we often see associated with food recalls. So can you give us a quick overview of some of those different types of bacteria that we see?
So really, you have to be a little careful here because as soon as you just put something down concrete, it'll change on you. But really, there's three types of bacteria that come to mind that seem to be associated with the majority of recalls in the fresh produce world. And the three there are E. coli, Salmonella, and Listeria. Now, each one of those types of bacteria have many different strains, and in some cases, like the Listeria, to the best of our knowledge, only the Listeria monocytogenes causes illness. If you're talking Salmonella, there's a whole bunch of different strains that cause illness. And with E. coli, the one we hear about the most is the E. coli 0157, but there are a few other subtypes of E. coli that also cause issues. So it really is those three that, I think of as the big three pathogenic bacteria. The other items we see with respect to bacteria are some of the viruses. In particular, the norovirus seems to be something that can contaminate products, fresh products. And the other one is the Hep A virus, which is quite often associated with water. So really, those are the other two big viruses that also play a role.
And so maybe it's worth noting right now that COVID-19 is not one of those viruses?
Yeah, no. So we need to be really careful when it comes to the COVID-19 that's currently causing the pandemic. All of the top global food safety and science bodies have been very clear that the coronavirus is not a foodborne virus. It is not something that gets transferred via food. It is something that gets transferred primarily via aerosols, so in the air, and to a lesser degree, touch as well. But primarily it is an airborne virus, it seems.
Talking about some of maybe more of the recent food recalls advisories that we've seen, looking at, the recent red onion outbreak, which is a Salmonella bacteria outbreak. What makes the red onion outbreak really unique?
Yeah, so what really makes the red onion one unique is the fact that it involves red onions. We've seen outbreaks in the past of green onions, but to the best of my knowledge, I cannot recall an outbreak that involved a bulb type onion. So your red onions and your Spanish and things like that. So this one is really unique in the fact that it's new. It's just weird. It's not the sort of thing that, people would have thought of beforehand. The onions themselves are, to the best of my knowledge, not known to be something that would support the growth of Salmonella. The way they're harvested, the way they're dried is you wouldn't think it would be conducive to contamination. But as I noted in the first question you'd asked, as soon as we think we know everything, the bacteria find a unique way to surprise us. So that one they're still investigating.
So is that, one of those wondrous worlds of science kind of things in bacteria where it's always adapting, it's always looking for new ways to survive and so on?
Maybe. My guess is that, maybe something like this has happened before and we just haven't had the tools or haven't had the foresight to make the linkage. And it's possible too. It could just be a one-off where something in the environment around the fields that those onions were being grown in had changed or had accelerated, and that resulted in contamination of the onion. So it's really hard to say at this point until they get some more of the results back and have done a more of a deeper kind of root cause analysis of what triggered this one. For sure, yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about root cause analysis in a little bit, but still, reflecting on some of those recent outbreaks, talking about the leafy greens outbreaks, that we've seen in the last couple of years with E. coli. Were there any circumstances or impacts that were unique there? Well, there was a few things that came up that were kind of unique, and specifically that the particular E. coli 0157 and those can be broke down into further subcategories through some of the genetic work that can be done now. I think that in at least a couple of those outbreaks, the same bacteria showed up in very different places, which kind of wonders how did they get from one to the other, or were they always there, and are they in the middle as well, and they're everywhere? It's really hard to say right now. Quite often in outbreaks like this, you look at water sources. That seems to be one of the main vectors for moving bacteria around, and in this case, the pathogens. Mm-hmm. So that's another area that they're looking at. Down in the U.S., they're doing a lot of work through like the leafy greens marketing agreement, and the associations down in the U.S., the United Fresh or PMA and Western growers. Everyone is spending a lot of time providing a lot of resources to the Center for Produce Safety to really try to understand what's going on here. Is there a common thread through it? Mm-hmm. And really get a better idea, via the science, because we have to base everything we do, on the science that we have to try and understand better, where this is coming from, and then obviously how we can continue to put in procedures to mitigate that. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, the impacts along the food chain for consumers, for retail, for food service, and then of course for the growers themselves. I mean, we had talked a little bit about consumer confidence too, right? Like when an outbreak happens on one farm, that's going to impact the entire commodity. People aren't necessarily always looking at, okay, where did that specific red onion come from, but looking at the entire red onion commodity itself. Yeah, for sure. And anytime you get an outbreak with associated recalls on any commodity, it really does act as a category killer for a period of time. Hopefully that is a short time and answers can be found, or it's a very limited distribution of a particularly of the product that's affected. What can happen is it'll just kill categories, and consumers are busy. Consumers are already stressed out over COVID and everything associated with that. When they go into the grocery store, they're not going to remember what that specific brand of vegetable or fruit was. They're going to remember the fruit or the vegetable, and the odds are they're just going to stay away from the category. From my retail days, when you had a recall on a product, a fresh product that would also be frozen, it would be a category killer for the frozen as well. So folks hear, product X recall, and they just make the decision to stay away from it. So it affects everybody. And that consumer decision obviously affects, the store that it happens in, where that store gets its product from, because they're probably going to start canceling orders, whether that's an independent store or one of the big chain stores. Of course, that ripples back to the wholesaler, which ripples back to the importer, which works all the way back to the farms.
Yeah, it's in everybody's best interest to talk about and uncover food safety.
Oh, 100%, for sure, yeah.
And so at the heart of this episode, what I really want to uncover is the process and the impacts along the supply chain of a food recall. So can you walk our listeners through, when a recall happens, who is involved and is responsible for what?
So sure. So there's various ways that the recall process, let me say, can be initiated. The two main ones are a manufacturer or grower catches an issue through their regular, food safety programs, and they deem that is significant enough that they need to do a recall on products. They would then contact their government authority. So in Canada, for example, they might get a hold of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, or maybe even their local health department. In the U.S., they may contact their state health departments or FDA and get the ball rolling that way. The second way a recall would get started would be if the public health agency, so in Canada, that's the Public Health Agency of Canada, and in the U.S., that would be the CDC. They start to see indicators through the networks they have, across the countries to bring in information, and then they collate that information. They start to see trends that may indicate an outbreak has started. So they'll see, let's say, a higher number of cases of salmonella in a particular region than kind of the standard background cases, because they're always going on to some level or another. That's really when you start to see those bump ups, those spikes start to form, that they will then go on to the next steps and try to understand what happened. In the case of PHAC here in Canada, they would start to they would be working with the public health departments and the provincial health departments to start and to do some food histories on people. So they would call someone who is sick and identify themselves, and then try to get a good idea of what they've been eating for the last couple of weeks. As they do that, across the cases, they can hopefully start to ID the products that are common, and they also compare those numbers that they get to the background numbers of how much of this product it would be eaten by the population in general over a given period of time. So they really try to build it up like that. Mm-hmm. What happens when they get to the point where they are confident in the information they have, they will then reach out to industry. So that would be back through retailers, for example, or they may reach back through an association such as ours, and try to get an understanding of where these products were coming from. At some point, they would likely either do a recall, so they would get to a place with the particular companies involved or the importer involved, and a recall would be done. Recalls are generally always voluntary, and there's sometimes confusion about the word voluntary. Voluntary does not mean that you can ignore it. Voluntary means that the company who's involved is putting it out. If for some reason a company made a decision that they would not do a voluntary recall, the CFIA has in its powers the ability to get a minister proclamation, let's say, and they can do a recall. But 99% of them are voluntary. Obviously, once the information is released publicly, then the food service operators and the grocers, who all have excellent recall procedures in place, mm-hmm. would remove the product from sale, and then the disposition of that product would be decided on. And that's usually a discussion between the buying community and whomever they bought it from, and that can differ depending on the companies. But
Yeah.
the key is to get it off the shelves quickly, and of course for consumers to check their fridges and to get rid of any product that they might have that may be part of the recall.
Interesting. Yeah. And we'll be talking with Tom Bach from Sysco Canada in a little bit about, some of those processes from the food service end and from that tail end of the supply chain. So looking at a lot of the recent larger recalls that we've seen, they've been products coming to Canada from the US. Does CBSA have a role when a recall happens?
When products coming across the border, yes, CBSA can play a role as well as CFIA. In one of the recent leafy green outbreaks, the Canadian government had put in place a requirement for information to come with loads from the U.S., indicating it wasn't from or coming from the regions in California or Arizona, depending on the recall, that were affected by the recall. So that's a situation where that would be communicated, to CBSA, and they would check that as part of the document check as products come across the border. And that's another thing where associations had worked with the government to ensure that what the government was asking for was realistic with respect to the industry, and making sure they understand what the industry could and could not do in a situation like that, as well as ensuring that message can be communicated back out to industry from the association so they understand what's being asked for. So there are certainly lots of situations where the checks and balances at the border will come into play.
Right. Yeah. In hearing about all this, all I can think about is the role of traceability and data in all of this. Like it's so key.
Oh, without a question. And traceability has been a kind of a hot topic over the last few months, for sure, probably the last couple of years. And it is certainly an area that the industry as a whole is working very hard on refining the accuracy and the speed that traceability actions can be taken. Mm-hmm. Obviously, when an issue arises, we want to make sure that product can get flushed out of the system, or removed from the system is probably a better way to put it.
As quickly as possible, yeah. And so talking about root cause analysis, if it's product coming from the U.S., is that where the FDA would step in?
For sure, because approximately 70% of the fresh fruits and vegetables we eat here in Canada are imported products, and the vast majority of that is coming into us from the U.S. or Mexico, and quite often, obviously, coming through the U.S. when it's coming from Mexico. So certainly, when it's been determined that the source is not a Canadian source of an outbreak, then yes, it would be the FDA and CDC role to understand what's happened down south and figure out from a root cause standpoint really the factors that led to the contamination and the subsequent outbreak. Certainly, the CFIA and PHAC up here, they're in very close contact with their partner agencies in the U.S. There's been numerous times where an outbreak is identified in Canada even before in the U.S. So, that information would flow south, and it would then kick off the process down there as well. But it's important not only for governments to be talking back and forth as they do, but, we have very strong relationships with the other produce trade associations, both from the fresh fruit and vegetable side of things, as well as, a lot of the other associations that kind of feed into that. So there's always a lot of discussion. There's always a lot of sharing of information, because it's in everyone's best interest to be able to understand these situations quickly and then work as a group to mitigate them from happening in again.
Absolutely. No, it's certainly important work, and certainly one that requires a significant amount of collaboration and discussion.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's important.
And so when it comes to resolving these situations, one question comes to mind, which is responsibility along the supply chain when a recall happens. If we're talking about the grower or maybe the retailer's responsibility when that product's on the shelves, what are the roles and responsibilities along the supply chain that CPMA members need to be aware of?
So I'm going to take it kind of back a step and say that this isn't something that should be recall driven. This is something that has to be part of every organization's business. Food safety is not something that the food safety department does. Food safety is what an organization does. It's that food safety culture, which is a kind of a growing topic of discussion in the industry. It really is encompassing the entire organization and everyone along the chain, right from the growers all the way through and including the consumers. They certainly have a role to play in this as well. But it's important that organizations, first of all, are following the legislative requirements in their particular jurisdictions. That goes a long way on to help ensure that food safety is maintained. Certainly taking advantage of organizations that can provide more food safety information to organizations. That's certainly a good thing that they need to do. It's important that the food safety programs they have in place don't sit on a shelf. They need to kind of continually evolve with the business. And as the science evolves, as it always does, it's important for us to be very open when it comes to food safety. Food safety is not a competitive advantage. If there's a situation or if somebody learns something, let's say about a particular bacteria that may be new, that's important to get shared with the industry as a whole, because when there is an outbreak, when there is a recall, it affects everybody who deals with that commodity group. So it's in everybody's best interest to ensure that, that sharing, that communication, that adherence to solid food safety programs is being adhered to all along the chain.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And maybe that's a good time to do a quick plug for the food safety training.
Yes. So here at CPMA, we're starting to roll out some different types of food safety training opportunities. The one we've got going right now is our Food Safety Quality Assurance and Regulatory 101. So this is a program that's specifically designed for smaller organizations or local suppliers into the food chain, as well as new employees to an organization or buyers within an organization who would like a little more information about food safety, regulatory, and QA, and kind of how they all fit together in a bigger scheme. So, please, the next session is October 20th, 21st, and 22nd, and more information can be found on the CPMA website. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. It's great to have you on. And I mean, you're the food safety aficionado at CPMA, and so it's great to hear from you.
Yeah, nice talking to you, Ian.
Thanks a lot. We're going to take a quick break with a word from our sponsor, Nature Fresh Farms. After the break, we'll speak with Tom Bach, National Director of Produce at Sysco Canada.
Hi, everyone. It's Sarah from Nature Fresh Farms. Food safety is important to building trust with customers and ensuring consumer health and safety is preserved. At Nature Fresh Farms, we believe it is the responsibility of our entire team to support the development and implementation of food safety systems, standards, and practices. For more information on our food safety procedures, visit our blog page at www.naturefresh.ca/blog.
My next guest is Tom Bach, National Director of Produce with Sysco Canada. Welcome, Tom.
Good morning, Ian.
So this episode, we're taking a look at food recalls. And, it's great to have you on to unpack some of the processes, the impacts, when a recall happens, some of the different kinds of scenarios of how a recall can get rolled out. And, specifically looking at tail end of the supply chain, looking at food service. So drawing from some of the recent recalls, most recent being, of course, the U.S. red onion, and now with alfalfa sprouts, when a recall like that hits the media, what are those first initial impacts on your business?
Great question, and certainly very interesting. It really is dependent on how the information is introduced to the public and to the consumer. You know, using the recent example of U.S. red onions, the topic was introduced as an advisory, where Canadians were advised not to eat any raw red onion. And as things unfolded and as the trace back and the follow up was executed, it became more specific, and the advisory became a recall because there was a specific source for the product. In that instance, when we have an advisory, it's far more difficult to narrow down exactly, what the impact will be. It's far more broad at that time. People are looking for some information and direction, and at that when an event like this is happening, there may not be specific information or direction that can be provided, which is, of course, why it becomes an advisory. And so when the advisory hits, the first impact will be, especially for food service, where everyone is concerned for the health and well-being of the customer and the general public, that if there's direction provided that an item, in the case of onions, perhaps should not be consumed, there will be an immediate reaction from everyone involved. So that reaction would be, pulling product back, changing recipes, quickly looking for alternate sources of product, consulting with your distribution or whomever or wherever you're purchasing your product from. Mm-hmm. So really and truly, like the first impacts, or the hit, as soon as something is released, some form of information, it's significant, and it's definitely there's an immediate pullback, and certainly I think we can appreciate that onions would be have a far greater reach than something like an alfalfa sprout. So sure, yeah. An alfalfa sprout would be less impactful, still very impactful to those who may have it on the menu or use the product. But the onion advisory, which became a recall, would certainly be more impactful.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. It really sounds like it depends on the scenario, depends on the commodity.
Absolutely.
And whether it's, an advisory first or whatnot. And then looking down the line, maybe more in the short to medium term, from an operations perspective, what kind of reaction is then triggered at Sysco, for example?
Again, great question. So the moment we have information and we then take a decision based on the information that we have, certainly an immediate halt in any distribution of any product that has concerns or any related issues. And so what that can mean from an operations perspective is any inventory you may currently have needs to be isolated and put on hold or quarantine. Mm-hmm. And any product that perhaps may be on the road, when we speak of U.S. product coming into Canada, we can have product on the road for anywhere from 48 hours up to 5 days, getting into different markets. So it's not just the immediate product that you have on hand, but of course it's product that you have on the road, and it could be any future product that's either about to load or certainly in the process of loading.
I guess the initial question is determining, if you have been impacted, and identifying, where your products are coming from. If your products are coming from a certain farm that has had an outbreak, for example. I imagine that, traceability is a really key piece in all of that. Is it a simple process, and what is that process, to determine if you have been affected?
A very interesting take, and this is where there is quite a bit of detail involved. So initially, determining if you've been affected or if there's product, again, depending on if it's an advisory or a recall. If it's an advisory, then it's really looking at country of origin, looking at where product may have come from and where product is affected. So again, if it's if it can be narrowed down to a specific province, state, area, country, then again, fairly generic, but it's very broad. So the impact is of course much greater and very broad. As it narrows down into an actual recall, recalls are essentially very very specific and very quick to be executed. So in a way, it's actually probably the easier of the two, of an advisory versus a recall. A recall, you get down to very specific information about a farm. And certainly all of the labeling on cartons of product that flow through our system, our network, are tracked and traced. And so we can readily identify if we have product on hand. And if we do, it needs to be pulled out of the system and properly disposed of. And, any customers that may have received any of those products would be contacted and given destruction instructions. And it would be either return or destroy scenario. But one way or the next, you would want to execute a plan that would certainly hold any affected product you have on hand and withdraw any affected product out of the market.
Mm-hmm. So when an advisory or a recall happens, I mean, one thing that I've heard and talking to our food safety specialist, Jeff Hall, about when a recall happens, consumers aren't necessarily always looking at where the farm is or where the region is that is the core source of that recall, but all they're seeing is red onion. All they're seeing is lettuce, for example. Is that one of the impacts or concerns that maybe you see or that may impact food service sales, through the long term? And are there any other impacts or concerns that need to be addressed, when a recall happens?
I think, especially in Canada, I think we actually have a very good system and a system that works well. There's always room for improvement. I think, in the wake of a recall or an alert, I think, getting the information out that the recall or alert has been concluded, and that whether it be been removed from the market or destroyed or whatever the conclusion of the recall or alert is, I think it is a very important point that needs to be published as well, and probably needs to be held up with the same vigor as when the alert or the potential recall breaks. It is a critical piece. I do find that overall more people are paying more attention and they are more interested. I think overall, as a population, we certainly are paying more attention to where product is grown and how it's grown, and the products that we're buying and the different percentage of items like fresh fruits and vegetables that we're consuming. So I do think that it's impactful to make sure that not only when an issue breaks that we cover it, but also in the conclusion of the issue that we also cover that. Mm-hmm. But when we're looking at at a recall or an alert, I do think it's incumbent on, again, the produce industry as a whole to make sure that we are taking our time and being deliberate and thoughtful when we're introducing that information to the public or to our consumers or our customers. I do believe that, in an operation, whether it be, a food service operation, a retail operation, whatever, produce makes up one component, whether it be of your basket of goods you're shopping for that week, whether it's the plate of food that you're about to enjoy. The produce portion of it is just that. It's a part of a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are many other things that, a food service operator needs to be aware of as a consumer, that we need to be aware of when we're bringing groceries home. And we rely on, whether it be the supermarket or the establishment that we're dining in, or wherever we are and where we're about to spend our money, we do expect a certain diligence of people to make sure that we're informed and that we know what's happening and, where products are coming from. And again, if it's affected product, that, or probably more appropriately, if it's not affected product, why it's not affected or where it's come from. That makes it a safe product to eat.
So before we wrap up, Tom, do you have any other thoughts on, where the industry is moving when it comes to not just food recalls and advisories, but food safety generally, and if there are any opportunities to improve?
I definitely think there's areas to improve. I think, there's always that room for improvement to get better, to be faster, be more accurate with information, to trace back quicker than we already do, which, I think we're doing a great job. I think we've come a long way. But, the faster and the better we get with the information overall, I believe that benefits everyone. And certainly if we can get to a point where, we don't actually see food safety issues in the public at all, that would be an amazing place to get to. Yeah. I don't know how realistic it is, but that should always be the goal. I do think overall the progress that's being made with labeling requirements as we look to the future to pinpoint as specific as possible areas, it does help expedite the process and contain recalls and alerts. And the more specific we get, and as we go on and as more information is able to be transferred or transmitted via labeling on cartons and specific information that way, I do think that it improves the overall process, and that it certainly puts us in a better position to be more successful in handling recalls and alerts appropriately, safely, and quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great insight, Tom. I really appreciate you hopping on and sharing. And thanks again.
You're welcome, Ian. Thank you for the opportunity. And I think it's a great topic and certainly a very interesting one, and one that's certainly been more in the public eye the last couple of years. So I applaud you for tackling this one.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Ian. Take care.
Thanks again to Jeff and Tom for joining me on this episode. For more information and to register for CPMA's online food safety workshop, head to cpma.ca/events. Until next time, fill half your plate with fruits and veggies, continue to seek out new knowledge, and basically never stop growing.